Okay, today's tutorial is going to be about how to set up the Raspberry Pi Zero W. So I have the Raspberry Pi Zero W here, and there's a couple of ways you can set it up. You can either set it up headless, just to run remote straight off your computer, which is a little bit more complex, or the beginner method, which I suggest for people setting up their very first Raspberry Pi Zero for the first time. Pay a little bit of extra money and just get all the connectors so you can do it directly on the Raspberry Pi, and you don't need to try to go via remote off your PC for your very first time. Now, what's not included in the pack is you'll also need a little mini SD card to put the operating system on. You can buy the SD cards already with the operating system installed on them, or you can do like what I've done, is I just have an old SD card I'm going to format, then download the operating system onto it and boot him up from there. Now, opening up the pack with the Raspberry Pi, what you do is you will find when it comes out of there that the Raspberry Pi Foundation haven't soldered the header on it. A lot of what they do is they do the majority of the hard work for you, but then they get the user just to do a little bit because it's all about learning. So we have to actually solder on the header onto the card. Okay, normally engineers will have a nice little vise for soldering where they can clamp things together and hold them in place. Most people at home won't have that, so you can use a couple of little bulldog clips like this just to hold the header in place while I solder it. And I'm going to solder a few pins in the middle, and once I've soldered a few pins in the middle, I can take both bulldog clips off and solder the rest. Now, whenever soldering, you want to solder when the iron is facing down like that, so the solder will run off the end of the iron onto the board. If you hold the soldering iron that way up and try to solder on the top, you'll find that it's very hard to get the solder to go onto the board. And all we want to do is we want to go along and heat each pin, and then as we heat the pin, just put a dab of solder on each one, and you'll find that it will run down the shaft and solder in quite well. I can't hold the camera in one hand and then use two hands for soldering, so I'm going to put this camera down now, solder this all on, and then come back to you. Alright, so I have all the header soldered on nicely. I'll make sure each pin has a nice little dab of solder on it, and there she is there, right, ready to go. Okay, now we need to set up the operating system on the SD card. There's two options. You can actually buy an SD card with it all set up, ready to go. I'm using an old SD card, so I formatted the SD card. I then Googled Raspberry Pi setup and got to the official Raspberry Pi Noobs setup page. I'm just going to click on Downloads. And then Downloads, I'm going to go to Noobs. And then I'm going to choose the full download zip down there at the bottom. Now, I won't press on that because I've already downloaded it in the past. It's not my first installation of Raspberry Pi. So I go down to my download page and I'll find it there, Noob Setup 2.4. I'll go into the zip folder when it goes in. Now, all you need to do is copy all of those onto my little SD card here. He's copying away, right? Okay, once all the files finish copying onto the SD card, I just simply place the SD card in the Raspberry Pi. I've connected via the adapter here my TV into the HDMI port. I've plugged in the next one up my adapter for a USB, and I have a little wireless USB keyboard, but any USB keyboard will do the job, but I've got a nice little baby Raspberry Pi one. And then I've put a power supply into the last one up there. You can use whatever you want for a power supply. That's just a power bank for recharging a tablet. And when I press on, you should hopefully, you can see I pressed on, a little light come up. We started getting some stuff on the TV, and it'll come through and it'll go through its boot up sequence. The initial bit here tells me that it's setting up the SD card. It creates all the stuff for the SD card, and it comes through here. That's a little bit better. Right, you need to select which one you want. I'm going to set up that one there. Sorry, click on him, then click install. Press yes. And now it's going to go away and install the operating system. This will take a little bit of time, so I'll come back when it's all finished and ready to go. It'll install, it'll reboot, and then you'll be able to start up the Raspberry Pi. Okay, that took at least half an hour to install the operating system. And then I clicked OK, and it went through and reboot, and I come back with the start screen for Linux. Now, a couple of things we need to do to be able to use it remotely control. First thing we have to do is we have to turn all the stuff on. So I go to the top left hand corner up there, pressing the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to come down to Preferences, and I'm going to come out to Raspberry Pi Configuration. Just taking our time. Then I'm going to come across to, you can set your host name and password and all that sort of stuff. What I want to do is I want to go to Interfaces, and at the moment everything's disabled. If I want to use a camera, I need to enable the camera. If I want to use SHH, I need to enable SHH and VNC. Those are the two remote control programs we're going to do. These other interfaces are stuff that I use for my robots. So I'm going to have them all on. Oh. This little keyboard I got's a little bit hard to use. So everything's turned on there. And you can, depending what you want to turn on. Oh. Press OK. Right, so he should be okay now. I can turn off. Oh. Little keyboard, a little bit hard to hit. Now it wants to reboot for those to take effect. So I'll come down here, come down to shutdown. Oh. Come on. This little keyboard. Oh, here we go. It is shutting down. We go to shutdown. Press OK. And it'll reboot. Right. Okay, the Raspberry Pi's rebooted and started up. It's now giving me this warning message telling me that I have enabled remote control access, but I haven't changed the factory standard user or password. Obviously, everyone who's ever owned a Raspberry Pi knows the factory user and password. If you don't change it, it means anyone that has access to your Raspberry Pi can hack it. I leave mine the same so I know what it is. People use the Raspberry Pi to say make a home security system. You obviously don't want your home security system with a standard password and stuff like that, so you can work out if you guys want to change it or keep that the same. Once I've done that, I want to go up the top corner here and look at, so do that again. I'm going to turn him on. I'm going to come down and log on to the home password. I've got to put in the password, which will be that should hopefully have gone through. She's loading up now. If I've got my password correctly, which it has. So now I'm connected to the internet. So in order to run via remote control, I need to know the IP address of my Raspberry Pi. When you have a network, every device in the network has an IP address so they can all talk to each other. So if your printer's on your wireless network, it has an IP address. If your laptop's on your wireless network, it has an IP address. If your phone, they all have their own unique IP address. So now with the Raspberry Pi, just like Windows, it has a graphical user interface and a command line. In Windows, you do the vast majority of everything in the graphical user face, and it's only when you want to do some low-level, powerful operation you use the command line operator. In Linux, the graphical user face is quite poor, and most of the stuff is easier to do in the command line, and that's the command line. It opens up this little window down here. If I type in ifconfig, enter, it gives me all the configuration. And what I'm looking for is my wireless local area network, which is the bottom one there. And it gives me my internet address is 192.168 1.1.108. So I need to know that to be able to log on to my Raspberry Pi remotely from my computer or talk to it any which way. Now I'm going to use Real VNC to be able to do that. So I need to download that on my laptop. I just Googled download Real VNC Viewer and I got myself to the Real VNC download VNC. All I need to do is click on that to download it. I have already done that because obviously I use it lots before. So if I go to my download directories, I can see it in there. And what happens is I can start that up. And when it starts up, I can put in the address up the top there, which was 192.168.1.108. So I put that in, press enter. I've already used this Pi before. Normally it will ask you for the username and password. If you haven't changed them, factory standard is username is Pi, lowercase, and password is Raspberry, all lowercase. All right. And boom, there we are. So whatever is on the TV is now also on my computer, and I can do anything here I want from my computer. On my computer, if I type in ifconfig on my computer, I press enter. Oops, sorry, which will give me the same thing as on the screen there, right? So whatever I type into that window on the computer, the exact same thing will be typed on there. So what it means is I won't need to be plugged into the TV, and I won't need to be plugged into the keyboard anymore, and I can just have a power supply going to my Raspberry Pi. Using Real VNC, I can just log on with my computer and run my Raspberry Pi remotely. All right. Now, another piece of software, I'll just minimize the Real VNC window for a second here. And same with that. Another useful piece of software, which I already have downloaded on my computer, you can Google it. WinSCP, which uses SHH, the same thing. I'll need to log on with the correct address, which I already have in here, 108. Yep, update. It's just saying it's a new one there. Yep. Right, and that basically drags and drops files. So that side there is the Raspberry Pi. Those are all the directories and all the stuff that's on the Raspberry Pi, and that's my computer. So I can just drag and drop anything from my computer to the Raspberry Pi, or from the Raspberry Pi back to my computer, and that's the easiest way to do file transfer. So you'll normally be, say, using Real VNC. You've written yourself a nice program, you've got it saved on the Raspberry Pi, and then you think, oh, what happens if the Raspberry Pi crashes? I want to get my program off. So you use WinSCP to be able to transfer a copy of it onto your computer. Or if you have, say, pictures or videos on your computer and you want to put them on the Pi, you can just copy them across the other way. It also does have, up here in the top corner, a command terminal. So you can open that for a putty session. Press OK. And then that gives me the command line. I can't see what's going on the screen, but I can type commands in there if I just need to type commands, and I don't need to see what's going on. So those two problems are. And that will get you up and going to begin with. And that's the easiest way to run a Raspberry Pi from your computer. All right, there we are.